exploring the art and craft of long-form news and documentary production, insights from the front lines. Join us for an immersive exploration into the dynamic world of documentary filmmaking. Our panel of seasoned experts will take you behind the scenes, unraveling the intricate process of bringing compelling stories to life. Professor Ben Shores is an award-winning journalist and filmmaker specializing in public interest reporting in the Pacific Northwest. A former fellow with the International Center for Journalists, Shores has reported from Germany, Panama, and South Africa. He was a national finalist for the Livingston Award, which recognizes the country's top journalist under the age of 35. His work at Washington State University focuses on diverse rural populations. He has twice received national education grants from the Online News Association. He also serves as the project manager for the Murrow News Service and the director of the Murrow News Fellowship. Please welcome Ben Shores.
Thank you to this panel, and thanks to everyone for showing up. You were probably hoping to see Professor Marvin Marcello. He couldn't make it, so you're stuck with me. My job is to get out of the way of these incredible panelists here. We're going to watch some short clips in here. I wish we had enough time to watch amazing work that these panelists have done, but we'll watch some excerpts and then the art of long-form storytelling and maybe how it looks a little bit different from what we typically on nightly news. So I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then I'll ask them. I'm going to tee them up with just a general question once to you about, what makes a great long-form story, how you identify a long form as opposed to a breaking news story. So I'm going to start with Liz Burch here. Burch is an anchor and managing editor at KNDU. I'm a Wayne reporter with a decade of broadcast experience, and she's of the Murrow College of Communication. Ariel Jacobosi is an anchor. Jacobosi, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna
say it. Just call me out.
I was like, okay.
Yeah, I tried. Is an anchor, a producer, and a reporter in Eugene, Oregon, and she cut her teeth here at Cable 8 and at Murrow News 8, and she's done some great stories and long-form pieces, including on human trafficking in the Pacific Northwest. Jeff Burnside is a journalist, a filmmaker, an author, a jack of all trades. He's also past president of the Society of the Environmental Journalists, which is a national organization, and he's a grad of Murrow School of Communication before we became a college. So yes. At Cable 8, yes. I feel like everybody here has a Cable 8 connection. Yes. Liz Burch, we go to Nicole Sanchez, is an Emmy Award-winning journalist. She's also a trustee for the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Northwest, which is where you get your Emmys. So, talk to Nicole about getting an Emmy. She's worked for a variety of stations, including Idaho Public TV, Web's Edge, and Idaho News 6 also. So thank you all for coming. Just a quick show of hands. How many Cable 8 alums or current students? Both? Okay, great. Well, I want to just, let's start down at the end with Nicole and maybe elaborate a little bit what you look for in a long-form story.
Yeah. I graduated here in 1999, but as I shared with the previous session, my first Murrow Symposium was actually in 1996 because I did not have the money to come here right away and was at community college and studied radio because we did TV. And I think it was actually one of the best that happened because radio can set you up to be able to, and when things go wrong, you just got to keep talking versus where you had a script for a while. And I was a scholarship kiddo after graduating from here. I did go to and was right for them, and I got married 3 months after I graduated, celebrating our 25th anniversary, so it was right. Following my husband's career, and I was telling our group, I actually worked in affiliate sales for a while for the Outdoor Channel. How did I get there? I looked in the phone book when we moved to a small area, Temecula, Murrieta, in Southern California, under T for television, and there was one thing, and it was our channel, and got into sales and started as a sales assistant, and I got to do a little bit of voice the Gold Prospector commercials. That was you. That was the one. And then I also had amazing experiences. My territory when I left, I had 5 states, including Hawaii. I got to go 10 days in Hawaii, visit clients, and be part of the Hawaiian International Billfish Tournament special we did. I had like a 600-pound marlin on my line. Actually glad I did not stay because nobody can touch the pole or help you in any way, which I did not know when I signed up for that, and found out some people took 10 to 11 hours bringing it in. Missed being on air and working in the Northwest, so I went to KIMA in Yakima and took a big pay cut, went from making a really sales commission to making $12 an hour. That was the weekend anchor reporter, and had this weird position open up at Q13. It was like a hybrid reporter writer, but at the time my general manager wanted to promote me to like AM PM news, and so it was like, oh gosh, like you can know yet about this opportunity, but I got yet. And at the time, because I'm from Renton, I grew up in Renton Highlands, my dad was sick, and I really wanted to get back. It's just a blessing to be able to go. Now, back in the days, that was more rare to do that market jump, and going to Q13 as a 25-year-old, 26-year-old, it was rough at first. There were a lot of photographers. You haven't paid your dues yet long enough, and you had to just get in there. I found out they had a need for weather fill-in, so Walter could have a vacation. I was like, oh yeah, I did weather in Yakima. I filled in twice, but it was from the news set I was producing, so I never actually stood by the wall except for here. I came late days, so somehow I started being the fill-in weather anchor. Actually, at the time, I just got trained to do the week show, and our weekend anchor had cancer, and he was out, and all of a sudden, I was just thrown into it. In hindsight, I probably should have been more transparent because I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just went, I got from there to Como. I was reporting as freelancer for Como, and then I got into government television. I worked for Channel and Pierce County Television. I still do work today for the Seattle Channel. I work on a show called City Stream. It's a news magazine show. It's a lot of former King 5 people. Hormo Hashi is my boss there. Great guys. Elevated my writing and challenged me. And in a way, that was my first experience doing mini documentaries, because they're 4 to 6 minute long stories. And it was for the most part a VO and tracked. Do more like a Nat Sot. Try not to put my words in there too much and let people just talk for themselves. But we moved to Boise, Idaho, May of 2019. It was just this intentional decision of a corporate video shoot there, and I called my husband. I said, I think this is what we're looking for. We just wanted to slow our kids. We had a couple safety issues. Really, men tried to lure my dog hard. Daylight, I'm watching horrified from the living room window, and just went to slow down a little. So that's when I got into real documentaries with PBS. So I'm still fairly new to like the real world of documentaries, and I got asked, J20, would you come on and produce this documentary about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how you can be resilient and overcome that trauma. I didn't know what I was doing. That was a very big jump to go from 4 to 6 minute to the hour long. And we had an advisory committee, and they have lots of feedback about who you should end up having to interview 45 for this hour long documentary. People and all over the state of Idaho, starting and shutting down because of COVID. But that was my first one that, and it did Emmy nominations and won a bunch of awards. And it was definitely the editors and the other co-producers that, really elevated me. And then I've done some Raising Resilient Kids, Mental Health Matters for Idaho Public Television as well, hour-long documentary packages that I would toss to. So I'm really passionate about, I'm a former foster parent. My kids are adopted out of foster care, 14, 16. So I'm really passionate about helping people with that. And then we had this kind of crazy idea last year with NATAS. We wanted to travel to all 5 states and do a profile mini documentary on people who were historic figures in the Northwest television scene who were diverse. We took a very wide definition of diversity. Could be female, could be person of color, LGBT, somebody with a disability. And that was one of the highlights of my career. And that's all volunteer. And Gary Stokes, manager at KSPS, who mentored him about how he was a black man in the wrong neighborhood in the 80s and was shot at and people got hit. He said, can we do this? I could help you get this on PBS stations. He says, could you program? And I'm like, these were 5 3-minute little nugget stories. And so I remember saying no and laughing and saying, he goes, it's okay, you don't ever have to tell anybody. Long story story that turned into Northwest Television Trailblazers and Diversity, which is an hour-long talk show documentary hybrid that we got. It's 25 stations instead of a gift of volunteerism, but I learned much. I met so many incredible people, and they all inspired me, and it's one of the things I'm proud of. That's one of my 25 years. That's my highlights.
We'll watch a little bit of a clip of that, but let's go to Jeff, and we're going to watch one of the trailers from Jeff's documentary films too. What do you look for, Jeff, in a long form story?
Right. First, let me give a shout out to and Drew and Rory in the back, because three guys. These are three mentors of mine. I raised money in my spare time for scholarships. Raised about $5 million so far. It's really been a lot of fun. But good to have you guys here. So the long form is such a fascinating platform because, unlike television news, I'm a TV news investigative reporter for a long time. Miami, Boston, Kansas City, Spokane was my first job, and at Como, Cairo, and King, and Seattle. And so in the news, it's the inverted pyramid, right? You want to just jack everything right up to the first sentence if you can. But in the long form, you have to resist the temptation to give it all away. And it's really hard to do, especially in your promos. I mean, some of the most telling stuff in a long form, you can't say up front because you want to drop these nuggets throughout the piece and develop this story so that there's a wow at some point in your piece, and at the same time make the beginning as compelling as possible. So those two dichotomies are really a great creative and storytelling challenge. Obviously, not all long forms are an hour long, but I think the best long form on television, and they're really good online, they put everything online, is fine. It's just the most amazing investigative documentary work I've ever seen consistently. And I've gotten to know some of those guys at national conferences. And 30 Minutes still does amazing stuff. And again, it's all online. It may be cardboard and stiff, but he's the most amazing writer, at least he and his producers are. I just think that their stories, and they don't get in the way of themselves. Reporters that come to TV news have a tendency to inject into the stories, and there is a place for that. There's a place for that. Process journalism is where you take the viewer along your journalistic voyage of uncovering the story. So it's oftentimes taking that, or even dead ends, to reveal what you finally found, which again doesn't come until later sometimes, if that's the path you want to take. That it's better than anybody. And then the visual. I mean, we're still a visually driven medium, and if you have a long form idea with no visuals, it's a bitch. The film I'm working on now is based on a book which takes place in the 1800s. I mean, what do you do for video? We were able to mine, dozens and dozens of photos back when cameras were still pretty new. And but even then, our challenge has been photo stuff. You don't want to do an hour or 45 or 30 minutes on stills. I mean, Ken Burns is great at this, but I'm no Ken Burns. Nor do I have the panache when you walk in the door and you say, I want to do this film using all stills. So what we've done is we partnered with a production company in Spokane called Little Fish, and they are really good at photo and cutting it up and making the elements float ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly. And then they add atmospheric elements into the sky and the air, and dust particles, a slow sun flare, all in a still picture. And it's just extraordinary. You don't notice it as a viewer, but subconsciously you do. All these old photos are so poor quality that you can't push in order to pan across them to eat it, make it more storytelling-like. So, but I also do believe in a slow push and a slow pull, imperceptibly to life. For that matter, any shot, interview and in editing, we would just do a slow push, even on a 10-second soundbite. imperceptibly because it just draws the viewer's brain into what you're saying. And I just love that little technique. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's, by the way, let me just say, I'm so glad that you, because of all the extraordinary elements in journalism and the civic duty that we all have as journalists, I believe that the documentary filmmaker is perhaps the noblest because it's not razzy, not in your face, less likely to make money, but it's just damn important story. Thank you.
Ariel, can you talk a little bit? You're our newest grad.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about why documentaries, and particularly in this time with TikTok videos and short form content, what are the both potentials and obstacles when you're working in documentary?
So, I mean, just to give a little bit of background, so I have not, done amazing documentary pieces like these two or these guys. I've only been in the industry for, I'm entering year 3. So I saw it as doing those really quick minute 30 news packages, with quick trying to draw the viewer in, breaking news, being on breaking news, VOSOTs, live VOSOTs, things like that. And then I had the opportunity to become a full-time anchor, golden handcuffs at the desk, just being able to anchor some primetime news. But that also gave me time to really think about telling very important stories to people. Like I think that I mentioned, I worked on kind of breaking down how bad human trafficking is in West. It's really bad. There are a lot of there because of the I-5. You can product. Hate to put it that way. That's how it is. So anyway, what was your question? I like to talk.
Can you do that? Can you tell the human trafficking story with a TikTok video?
No, you can't. And the reason you can't do that is there are so many little moving parts that don't seem that important. And yeah, you could make a TikTok about, hey, human trafficking is a really big problem in Western Oregon. But you can't really get into you can talk about, hey, this sucks, but people aren't really going to pay attention. When you're sitting watching a long form story, you're locked in, and you have the opportunity as the storyteller to keep the person. What you were saying was, what Jeff was saying was, opportunity to kind of leave little nuggets for later, and kind of really take viewers on that investigative journey and kind of looking into it. And in TikTok, I don't really get to sit down and talk to someone who was picked, but I got to do that with my long form storytelling. I talked to a woman who is spending her time now, 20 years after being trafficked in LA. She was held hostage for, I think, she was given tranquilizer so she would stay still and wouldn't remember what was happening to her. She couldn't even remember going to the bathroom because she was so out of it. Got to sit with her and talk to her about her experience. She was super open about it. Talked to her for 30 minutes, and I got to listen through that interview and put that into that people are going to want to listen, right? So you can't do that in a TikTok video. I know that's I can't do Instagram reels are fine for me. But you can't interview a human trafficking victim. Maybe for a podcast you could, but I mean, being able to tell a story talking to a victim or a survivor of trafficking, but also talking to some officials within Western Oregon. How are you trying to fix this problem? How are you trying to raise awareness? How is the Eugene Airport trying to spot traffickers? How do they educate their airport staff? What are some resources? Kind of just bringing it together into an awareness piece, and not just, hey, human trafficking's bad. Here's why it's bad, and here's how we can fix it. And that goes for any other story, not human trafficking. Like, we have a huge drug issue in Western Oregon, a lot of homelessness in Eugene. I'm in Eugene. A lot of people on the street. It's a lot of investigative pieces about it. And it's great as a full-time anchor to be able to do that because I can take a couple days off. My team's great. They cover for me and things, and I get to really get in touch with the community on things like that. Another story that I think I sent to you was a story about suicide prevention. And it's a topic. It's kind of a topic to talk about, but I got to interview the mom of a 13-year-old girl who hung herself by her jeans, and mom walked in on her. And I got to interview her about a month after that happened. You don't get to do that on TikTok. And because that story deserves more time. than a minute and 30 seconds. That was a 2-part story that I got to air 2 days in a row. So TikTok's great for quick little informational bits like, hey, this is what's going on in the community, hey, really quick, or maybe a teaser to put a teaser trailer on for your news station, but it's not the same effect as a long form story. So sorry if I made anyone uncomfortable with my topics.
So this will be a different investigation, but it's up to you what you want to show. This one is on the lack of public defenders. This is the one we were talking about.
That one, it started 18 seconds on that one.
I did. I spent the day with their bike team actually riding along so I could see the crisis firsthand and see what they're dealing with as they patrolled downtown Portland during the day. And I'll tell you, every call they responded to involved fentanyl. They say some days they're going to several overdoses in a day and giving out all the Narcan they have.
We get a quick video of this for the gram.
You may have heard of the Portland Police Central Precinct Neighborhood Response Team Bike Squad in the past year from their popular Instagram account.
Oh no, oh no, oh no, 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 no.
Which details what they do on a daily basis riding around the city.
And maybe put your drugs somewhere else.
Officer David Bear started on the team 4 years ago.
When I took this job, this was a total nothing gig. I took this job because I could get day shift with weekends off. And our biggest concern back then was people drinking beers in public.
But as the city drastically changed, so did the Bureau and his job.
There was nobody else right after COVID, and they disbanded units to staff up patrol. And we were like one of the last self-initiated units left. And downtown was, in its current state, and so we just kept working, and it kind of morphed into this. And we wanted people were obviously upset, how bad downtown is. So we're like, we'll show you that we're doing stuff.
Officer Bear says the Bureau started the Instagram account to talk about bike registration. It morphed into something much different,
which is really just showing, frankly, the gritty first-person look into downtown and the current state of downtown from our perspective.
He tells me the 4-person team is focused on livability issues downtown. And these days, that revolves around one thing.
At this point, fentanyl is essentially my full-time job.
Hello. How's it going? Excuse me.
What's that right there? What's that? Okay. Fentanyl? Do me a huge favor. Could we limit the amount of fentanyl we're doing on the sidewalk in public? Could we go do that somewhere else, maybe? Do you have your ID on you? And you as well.
What?
Do you have your IDs on you?
I do.
You don't?
No.
What about you? You don't have one? You picked up the tinfoil and the thing?
Yes, I just think this is trash.
Well, I appreciate you wanting to help clean up the street.
Officer Bear says a lot of the people they stop for public drug use think fentanyl is legal since the passage of Measure 110, which decriminalized the possession of small amounts of hard drugs in Oregon.
Because you can't have fentanyl.
They've been in the car the whole time.
This story sits with you for a while. Still today, how do you sort of handle this both for the viewer and maybe also as a filmmaker? How do you...
It's hard. I mean, especially the years I spent in Portland, I mentioned being out on breaking news a lot. And it's definitely something that sticks with you, seeing people die and seeing that kind of death and destruction. Again, I think that I just try to separate myself from it and remember that I'm providing a public service. It's important, again, people can make their opinions, they share an opinion. They see, kind of coming back to what we were joking about earlier, you should feel uncomfortable when you realize that there's people in your community dying on the street. It is really hard to see. I think a lot of it comes down to that being up yourself, a lot of good therapy, and having healthy coping skills too. Thinking about kind of how you can release that at the end of your day. Having said that, definitely do make some conscious decisions in our stories. Don't show people dying with body bags. Don't show people, and some really hard to do on breaking news. You have to crop your image in a certain way or positioning the camera in a certain way, because you're right, there is an extent, the ethics of what you're showing. Especially maybe those people's families don't know what has happened to them yet. But it's always kind of a gray area and a little bit of a fine line of telling the truth about what's happening, but also shielding people a certain graphic.
So I want to ask just for everyone up here, I mean, we teach objectivity in journalism, but there's also empathy, right? There's real human connections with that. And how do you balance that need to be objective with also saying I'm a human as well? And Ariel, I might ask, I'm not going to show that story. It's incredibly powerful. But I said that empathy with objectivity.
Well, I mean, I kind of looked at that just like I asked. I have sources that I've worked really closely with for a couple of years, and hey, there's another child suicide. Just thought I'd let you know. And I'm like, I think we should do what's important as the parents in our community. I'm not a parent. I don't have kids, but I know how hard it would be for my mom if she was in those shoes, in that situation. So I think that, for that type of topic, it's okay to be more empathetic and obviously be like, here are just the facts. Here are the number of deaths. Here are the number of children who are. But then also just getting that emotional side of things, because that's going to make people listen and that's going to make people want to talk about it. I mean, I think in the anchor tossed to me in studio, the anchors, they're a little older. They were a little uncomfortable with, it's uncomfortable. People don't want to say, hey, a kid killed themselves. That I still feel weird saying it. But I made sure I assured the viewers, I'm like, hey, this is really tough to talk about. Sorry if you're uncomfortable, but here's what's going on. And take it or leave it, however you want. And at the end of the day, as long as making a difference, the mom that I interviewed, she texted me and said, hey, thank you for doing this story. You did it so well. And I didn't care if other people at my work were like, hey, that was really well done, like good stuff. I never like my worst critic, but having that mom say, hey, thank you so much. Or having my guy, his name's Dan, he texted me and said, hey, just a couple days since this story's aired, there have been people coming in asking for help because they're suicidal. They want help. They saw your story. They saw the resources that you mentioned. They want help. You're making a difference. Thank you very much. So that's where I'm like, okay, we can be empathetic and say, hey, there's help out there. It's okay. I didn't investigative as what Liz did, but kind of just raising awareness about something that's uncomfortable and just, it tells that story. It's not even like, this is really sad, watch it. It's, hey, this happened, and people will get their own emotion from it. So you don't even have to say this is sad. People are going to know it's sad. So I guess I hope that answers your question.
Before we go to other clips, because I want to show an entirely different one from you for you. But Jeff and Nicole, can you talk a little bit about this topic as well?
Well, if I could pick up what you just said, one of the neatest things in Idaho documentary, which again is my first long form one, is it created like community conversations, and that's, I'm sure, with what you both did and what you're describing, and that felt to me like nothing I'd ever experienced before, where you get a little feedback from news clips and news stories, but this for us, so when COVID happened and we had to shut down production, I ended up producing 12 mini resilience pieces, interviewing people on Zooms or outside when we thought, okay, it's safe as long as we're 6 feet apart, outside with masks on. Then we had these seminars that people could attend and get college credit. And one of the biggest compliments to me is when I found out that the CASA Guardian Ad Litem program is using that resilience documentary. And for me as a former foster parent, like I said, I don't pay it. Like that is making a difference in people's lives. And that fills my cup, because it was ugly and it was hard to hear some of the stories I heard. But there's a hope you bring, to the piece.
I think objectivity and empathy are not mutually exclusive. Not in every case, at least. Objectivity being clinical, it's side. But as you all should know, that there is truth. So there are some issues on one particular side. Smoking, for example, is not really open for debate about whether it causes cancer. To go where the truth takes you. But the empathy is such a great question, because we've all encountered stories where you talk to people who've really been through tragedy. And it's a real, you have to just do the talking. No one wants to talk to a reporter when something horrible has happened. But there's oftentimes that comes out of it. And oftentimes grieving parents know that. That interview is, I think, the most difficult interview to do, and I think it's the interview where you have to do it differently than any other kind of interview. You have to not talk a lot. You have to listen a lot. You have to not go on and on and on with your questions. Know when to question and shut up, and then let them start talking. And
Let them cry.
And let them
I always
cry.
want to hold people, and I learned you got
No.
to shut up and
Yeah.
let them have their moment. That's
right.
hard.
Sorry for once it turned off the camera when she started crying. I'm thinking, no, I didn't want to tell him right in front of this woman to keep rolling, but he never should have done that. You can always decide later whether to use it. And then the best question, especially in those circumstances, is always the last one. Is there I haven't asked you that you want to say? Now, you'd be shocked how your best sound often comes from that and at the very end. So empathy is so important.
So Jeff, you've got a little bit of a unique situation. You have some trailers. Now you have independently produce a piece, and then you've got to convince somebody to come in and run it. We have time for maybe one of those. Which would you first contact or Cash Up
man,
Davis?
that's a
or
good one. I guess first
contact's all the way over to the left. Right
here.
Yep.
And you'll have to crank it way up if you don't mind.
For thousands of years, we lived off the land, the sea, the trees. Our people lived in harmony, honor, balance, and respect of nature. It's the Indian way. Our culture thrived. We couldn't imagine losing it until the visitors came. Our world as we know it would change forever.
About the first contact between Pacific coastal Indians from basically Oregon, Washington, British Columbia up to Alaska, and the white world. It was really Captain Cook when he set foot in British Columbia. There have been two other ships that never went ashore. Believe it or not, that's why it's British Columbia today, because they actually never set foot on land. And it's a fascinating story, but we're also examining the natural world. That point is the starting point, the point of first, and then how did it change over generations, all these years? And so it's a poignant. You notice how that breathed a lot. I mean, like after 25 years of stories into tight spaces for TV news and investigative work, now I had to let it breathe and be dramatic. So this was a great creative challenge, and really kind of fresh. You're so in tune, and I can't imagine letting 4 seconds run by without somebody saying something in a damn piece. So I think this is a really exciting story. This has never been done before.
What do you learn in a trailer that you're not looking for in the actual film? What is the trailer going to do?
Sure, yeah, it's a tease. Just bring them in and not tell the whole story, and use your best video, but again, just to bring them into the story so they really want to go watch the whole thing or invest in this case. It's a problem. I work with a guy out of Hollywood who raises money for, but also does documentaries, not because they make any money on it, but because they feel it's. And so I told him about $500,000, and well, that's good because investors won't pay any attention to you if you're under $600,000. I thought that was so interesting. So I remember that for all my future. It's not funded yet, but interestingly, there are a lot of wealthy people who live in this area who are so proud of the story, and so I think that being some of the biggest funders in it. Yeah. By the way, can I just add one quick thing? So when Cook ended, the tribes gave him these wood carvings. The Pacific Coast, they're world famous for these wood carvings. People brought the world the totem pole. And so Cook, thinking these savages and heathens didn't care much, gave them to the crew, and they ended up sprinkled all over the world. But a bunch of them ended up back in the museum in London. And when you walk in to the museum, there's a totem pole right in by the. It's like, wow, the whole world gets to see this product, this region. And then we had a special private show of artifacts that were literally cooks that came back on his ship. So the elder there, I told him about this. He goes, I see pictures, I could tell which family made them. This is 17 something. And so we want to bring him to the British Museum to go see these pieces. And, you know, we've tried to assure the British Museum it's not a repatriation issue. These were given to the crew. They accept that. But wouldn't that be amazing? You know, that's not something we would put in the trailer, but it's something that's those nuggets that we peel away the onion and I get to tell that story.
Nicole, you did a piece on sort of affairs in North television, and I think it's really important because not everybody gets to make feature films, and traditionally it hasn't been.
Yeah,
historically.
and this was like a zero budget. So now, let's just lower the bar. It's, literally, we were all volunteers.
Yeah.
And it was just this grassroots idea from the diversity committee. Initially, you know, how do we honor the people? It was the 60th anniversary of the Regional Emmy Awards. Hey, let's look at, you know, trailblazers through the lens of diversity. And we did these short little pieces. And then I'll be honest, we faced a lot of challenges because I did need to get a travel budget. Yeah, I'm working for free and given all this time. And then after it was all done, it was funny. I learned a lot about air emissions insurance that PBS stations will, you know, coming from a commercial background, you know, I didn't know much about that. So I had to get references and who's insurance broker. And then they asked me, who's your distributor? And I went, well, what does that even mean? I said, I think it's me. I think I'm calling emailing, and that's fun. All the stations. So to get to stations, you know, throughout the greater Northwest was huge. To get the budget approved, that little travel budget, it was at least 2 stations that are going to air it. And I thought, okay, well, I know it was Gary Stokes over at KSPS. It was his idea to expand this piece. And yeah, it was a gift. It really was a gift. We had hurdles though. Our photographer had a little long COVID at the end, and somebody had to take over and help. And it's like shit hit the fan, and that's when you know you're working on something special. When you just go, I don't even know how to move this forward. We're getting stuck, and then somebody has to go out of the country. And I'll tell you, this is in the noisiest hallway of City Hall. Because when we got there, I flew in and we had people from Montana come, and Portland, Ken Body from Coin was ones we featured. He drove, and we get there, and I've had a horse getting there. My flight was late. I got screamed at walking in the streets of Seattle as I'm walking to City Hall. Urine filled, steps from like I was frazzled. And, the photographer Randy Ng, he was my partner in crime on this one. He says we have video, but apparently we have nobody to help us. This was supposed to be an hour live to tape. Took 7 hours. There was a coffee stand, grinding coffee, right? And the doorbell, and then there was an after hours event at 5 o'clock. I've never been so puzzled in my life, and that's going. This is gonna go somewhere, do some good. But
let's start with Washington, where we feature several amazing people who've made important contributions to our industry. And then we'll be joined by some of the journalists from Washington we featured to learn more about their courageous journeys.
I started in 1968.
I came to Cairo 7 in 1982.
1978.
I started in the business in 1980.
1978.
1975.
I started in television in Seattle in 1974.
I was actually the first woman to anchor a local newscast anywhere in the country, which I didn't really know until some professor in Arizona wrote a book about it and told me.
I was the only Latino at Como Radio when I first came there. Actually, I was the lone person of color for a long time.
Mrs. Bullitt was, I think, one of the first women, if not the first woman, to run a television company. And she started in 1948, and it was the first television station west of the Mississippi.
I was never in a newsroom where the majority of people were black. I was always very used to being in the minority, very used to having to bring a perspective that somebody may not have thought of.
When I was working in Dayton, a woman was on the phone and she said, there are a lot of people in this neighborhood that don't want to see a lot of black people in the neighborhood. I'm walking across the street to get to my car, and from down the street, this person yelled at me and he said, stay away from that car. And I yelled back, and then the next thing I heard were gunshots. And at that point, people surrounded the house and started firing in the house. I was fortunate enough to not be hit, but several people in the house were.
I think with all these stories, we see stories we don't typically see on the nightly news, including who's being camera. And I wonder if you might just give sort of parting advice here, a minute or so from each of you about for students out there or aspiring filmmakers. Start here.
Yeah,
or
I think
long-form storytellers.
Sure. I mean, I think there is a time and a place for breaking news and spot news, meaning you go out to happening and just say the bullets are behind me, this is what's happening. But I think the difference in what sets this kind of journalism, I mean, try not to cry after watching that clip, apart is you can really get to the heart of the matter. You can really what's happened in an in-depth way, and that means having those uncomfortable conversations. That means going in those uncomfortable spaces because you have to show people what's actually going on. I think that's the benefit of long-form journalism. The hard part. Long-form journalism is easier just to walk up to a police line, say, hey, why is that on? And talk for a minute 30. In my mind, this is a lot harder, but also more impactful.
Yeah, I can't speak to getting into, specifically documentary, going from, doing breaking news hits, saying, hey, you can see the shots in these buildings. Hey, there are this number of people in the hospital, shots fired outside of an elementary school, like crazy stuff, right? I think doing that first and being able to go and talk to people right after tragedy strikes, make it quick, it makes you appreciate the long form storytelling. So if you're getting into news, I can only, but if you're hoping to get into news, get real good at doing the quick storytelling, and then that'll really focus on your writing, because if you're a bad writer, no one's gonna remember getting in, and I'm like, oh, I don't need to worry about writing. That's the one thing that you should be worried about, because no one cares what you look like. Nobody cares how good you are. If you're not a good writer, no one's going to want to listen to you. So really focus on that. That would be my main thing of advice. Main piece of advice. Also take in everything that you learn out in the field. We'll use that later when you start doing the more long form storytelling. So to learn when you first get out the gate out of college, doing the quick form storytelling, and that'll make you appreciate better when you have to do long form storytelling. So take it all in.
Cool.
Jeff, words of wisdom.
So I think in long form, it's okay to make money. If you sell yourself short, it won't. So it's hopeless anyway. So it's okay to make money. Television news or journalism, for that matter, which is fantastic. You give yourself a license, imaginary license, to have in your pocket, because in countries like this, a journalist is so critically important. We do a license to represent the public. This is where it can't easily go. You have a duty to tell the public. You are part of the public log. Critically important. Same true for long form storytelling. I think the strongest advice I give you is network the hell out of things. Why have a national conference yet? I don't care how much it costs. Just find a way to. I think the best conferences are the investigative reporters and editors conferences, ORG, student discounts, and they help you with other kinds of, find a scholarship or someone to pay. Network, take business cards. They're so old fashioned, but that's what you need to do. Make them and just network, and then follow up with all these heroes that you see, whose work you should know, and look at pieces online and study them, and go to the conferences. They're just sitting there, goldmine, waiting for you to go. You should go tomorrow. Really, go. Just go.
Super fast. Just be passionate. Find what your passion is. Surround yourself with people who elevate your work. That's one of the best things there are people that I work with that just together we can collaborate and do really amazing stuff. If you happen to be in Matt's class tomorrow, I'll be there at 9 talking more Blazers. And when you're at a level in your career where you've got a couple years under your belt, sign up to Judge Emmys. It is one of the best ways to get inspired and to learn what's going on. Yeah. And you will start to see work. That's what. Dang, that's the oh my my gosh, I think that's one of the best things you can do is judge Emmys.
By the way, I judge on a couple of national judging panels, and so I get this great opportunity to see some of the best work in there. All that is online. You can go to the journalism awards pages, and they'll have the award winners or even the runners up, and you can go look at the best journalism that year.